Hello dear students. After completing the first three chapters, that is basic introduction, residential status, scope of income and income from house property. Now let us start the second head of income for us. Basically it is the first head of income. Income from salaries. From section 15 till section 17 along with some rules and also with section number 10. This all merged we are going to learn over here. Now all the important concept which is relevant for the exam will be discussed. The very first section is the basis of charge, section 15, it is basis of charge, section 15. It says that salary is taxable on the basis of due or receipt whichever is earlier. That means if you receive advance salary, it will be taxable. If you don't receive salary, you will be receiving in the next year. Still if it is due, it will be taxable, whichever is earlier. But the element of bonus is always taxable on the basis of receipt. If it is only due, it is not received, then it is not taxable. Then arrears of salary. I have asked for some more salary from my employer in past years. My employer has denied. There was some dispute going on. Finally, the dispute is settled and he agrees to pay me that increment with retrospective effect. It is called as arrears of salary. This arrears of salary is taxable in the year in which it is allowed to pay by the employer. In the year in which dispute is resolved, my employer has agreed to pay, in that year it will be taxable. But with regards to this, one concept is there's relief under section 89 that we'll learn in future. Means now, how to compute the salary income? There is not a fixed structure, but what are the elements involved? What we are going to learn? The very first thing which is always there in the element of salary, and it is basic salary. It is always taxable fully. Second, advance salary, section 15. I just said due or received, whichever is earlier. So as per section 15, can I say advance salary is also taxable? Then arrears of salary with increment of retrospective effect, that is also taxable. Bonus, taxable always on receipt basis. Commission, it may be fixed commission per month, it may be percentage of net profit, it may be percentage of turnover. Whatsoever it may be, commission is always fully taxable if it is received from employer. Allowances. You know, employer can't repay each and every perfect reimbursement to each and every employee. So a scheme is drafted by HR department that for conveyance will give 500 per month. For food will give 200 per month, for uniform will give 300 per month, like this. So these are called as allowance which is given per month as a fixed amount to mitigate your respective expenditure. That amount may or may not be depending on your expenditure. Now what are the allowances, what are the exemptions, that we'll learn in working note number 1. But remember, some allowances are not fully taxable. From that you get certain exemption, the balance only taxable. Then retirement benefit. Whenever you get retired from a organization, you get gratuity, pension, leave salary, provident fund. All of this are taxable up to some extent, exempt up to some extent. We learn in working note number 2, what are the retirement benefit, what are the exemption, balance taxable. Then perquisite. If you are a high level employee in your organization, then you may not be given the fixed amount per month. You may be given the direct facility. Facility of rent-free accommodation, facility of motor car, facility of usage of movable asset, like that. And along with that, you may be also given the perfect reimbursement of the actual expenditure. This is also called as what? Perquisite. Section 17 subsection 2 will learn how to do the valuation of perquisite in working note number 3. After doing total of all of this, what we will get is gross salary. From gross salary, we will get a particular deduction called deduction under section 16 that we'll learn in working note number 4. And then we'll get the net salary, which is income from salary, which is a taxable salary. Now, without wasting the time, moving to the very first working note number 1, allowances. Now, what I said, what is the meaning of allowances? It is the per month fixed amount given to mitigate your expenditure. It is not actual reimbursement. It is the per month fixed amount. Whereas the perquisite is what? Either non-monetary benefit or reimbursement of the actual expenditure. Now the very first allowance that comes into the picture, DA, which we call in short DA, dearness allowance. Dearness allowance is generally given to mitigate the gap of your expenditure which has increased due to inflation. In general, each and every organization, they gave dearness allowance. What you have to remember, dearness allowance is always fully taxable. Now there will be two type of dearness allowance. I will say there is two portion of the dearness allowance that you are getting. One percentage forming part of retirement benefit, another one percentage not forming part of retirement benefit. Generally at the time of retirement, when HR department will do some calculation, they will consider your past salary, and in past salary they may not consider your full dearness allowance, they may consider only some of the portion of the dearness allowance, which is fixed from now itself. But let me make you very much clear, whether your DA is percentage forming part or not forming part, it is just an information, it has nothing to do with taxation. As of now, what you are getting, it will be fully taxable. So DA fully taxable. Second, coming to foreign allowance. Now when you are working in any other country as an embassy person, as a visa office person, as a government employee, the government of India must be paying you allowances and perquisite over there. However, if you are an Indian citizen, you are working in some other country, government of India is giving you allowances or perquisite to work over there. As per section 10 clause 7, that foreign allowance or foreign perquisite will be completely exempt. Now see, understand, if any other company is giving you foreign allowance, taxable. If you are not an Indian citizen, taxable. If government of India paying you allowance within the country, taxable. Exempt only if government is paying through an Indian citizen who is working outside India, then only exempt. Then next, house rent allowance. See, you must be paying rent to live in the city or to live in some transferred city, whatever. To mitigate the gap of expenditure due to that rental expense, you are given house rent allowance. But house rent allowance is not fully taxable, not fully exempt. Something exempt, something taxable. Now what is exempt? It is given under section 10 clause 13a. Three conditions are given. You have to find out the answer of all the three conditions. Whichever is lower will be exempt, balance will be taxable. Now what is the first condition? Actual house rent allowance received. See, one thing you remember, in the entire income tax, your exemption cannot exceed your income. So here whatever you are receiving, exemption cannot be more than that. And that's why what is the first condition? Actual HRA received. Or condition number 2, if you are paying the rent in a metro city, that is Delhi, Kolkata, Bombay, Chennai. If you are paying rent in any of these cities, the second condition will be 50% of the salary. And if you are paying the rent in any other city, then it will be 40% of the salary. So depending on the city, you will get the percentage of deduction, that is exemption in the second condition. If metro city, then 50%, otherwise 40% of salary. And the third condition, rent paid minus 10% of salary. Whatever rent you have paid, deduct 10% of salary from that. Remember, if you are following the optional tax system of 115 BAC, you will not get any deduction of house rent allowance, it will be fully taxable. Now the very interesting thing, in the second condition they said 50 or 40% of salary. In the third condition they said deduct 10% of salary. Question arises, what is the meaning of the word salary? For many of the things, salary meanings are basic salary plus DA, which is percentage forming part of retirement benefit, plus commission, which is percentage of turnover. Remember, only at 2 to 3 places different meaning is there, otherwise in the entire salary chapter this meaning of salary will be there. Basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage. Whenever I say basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage, what you will assume? Basic plus DA percentage of retirement benefit plus commission percentage of turnover. Now if advance salary is given in the question, definitely it will be taxable. But while calculating the house rent allowance exemption, you should not consider advance salary in the meaning of salary. Because you must not be paying the rent in advance. It depends on the rental exemption, and that's why. So here I can say that my exemption of HRA depends on 4 things: salary, rent, HRA amount and location. If any of these things change, my exemption will change. So what is the better option? If during the year all the elements are same, there is no variance in that, calculate only one exemption per year. But if in between of the year any of this element is changing, from the date on which it changed, do the calculation of exemption for that much period separately and for the earlier period separately, and then merge both exemption. For this, you can refer exercise question number 1, or even in JKSC we have given 2 questions, one in classwork and one in homework. Both question you can refer, which depends on this fact that if any of these things changed in between of the year, do the calculation separately. But remember, if you are receiving house rent allowance but you are not paying any amount of rent, then you will get no exemption. You will get no exemption. If no rent is paid, the third condition answer will be 0, and that's why you will get no exemption. Simple. So that was house rent allowance. Whichever is lower will be what? Exempt. Now the fourth one, special allowances. What is special in that? What 6 allowance I will tell you, the exemption of that 6 allowance is amount of allowance or expenditure, whichever is lower. What I said, when you receive 6 allowances, any of these 6 allowances, what is the exemption? Amount of allowances received or amount expenditure spent, whichever is lower. Now, this exemption is given in section 10 clause 14 subclause 1, and the name of the allowances are given in rule 2 BB. Now, what are those 6 allowances? Remember the short form CUTHAD, CUTHAD. That means C stands for conveyance allowance. That is, from office to client place to office, whatever traveling expenditure is done. U stands for uniform allowance, to purchase or to maintain the uniform. T stands for tour, travel, transfer allowance, generally for transferring the, place of job and all. H stands for helper allowance. For whatever your official duty, you are appointing a helper and your boss is reimbursing the salary which you paid to helper. A stands for academic pursuit allowance, to pursue the further study, whatever fixed amount you are given. D stands for daily allowance. So CUTHAD, number 1, C stands for conveyance, U stands for uniform, T stands for tour, travel, transfer, H stands for helper, A stands for academic pursuit, D stands for daily allowance. Remember, if you are following the optional tax system, then in this 6 allowances, you will get exemption only of 3 allowances, conveyance, traveling and daily allowance. Other 3 will be fully taxable. What is the exemption? Again, I am repeating, for this 6 allowances, it is allowance or expenditure whichever is lower. That means if you are receiving uniform allowance per year 10,000, your expenditure is 8,000, balance 2,000 taxable. But let's say you are receiving 10,000 of uniform allowance, 18,000 is your expenditure, only 10,000 will be exempt and 0 will be taxable. Are you understanding this? Now, the next part, allowances. Exemption which is based on certain limit. Means here you don't have to see the expenditure. Forget about the expense. You see what you are receiving, what is the limit of expenditure, what is the limit of exemption they have given, whichever is lower will be exempt. Now there are so many allowances in that, but many of them belongs on some notification which is not applicable to you. What is important is just this 4 allowances for the last day, and that's why I am revising these 4 allowances as of now. Number 1 in this, transport allowance, from home to office, office to house, whatever traveling expenditure you have incurred, for that you are given transport allowance. Now remember, generally transport allowance is fully taxable, you won't get any kind of exemption. Please don't mix conveyance to travel transfer and transport. Conveyance to travel transfer, for this too based on expenditure. Transport allowance fully taxable. But if transport allowance is given to a blind person or a handicapped person or a disabled person, for them exemption will be up to 3,200 per month. Means whatever you are receiving or 3,200 per month, whichever is lower. But this exemption is only when you are a blind, handicapped or disabled person. Second one, children education allowance. For mitigating the expenditure of your child who is going to the school, your employer is giving you per month a fixed amount. World's largest exemption given, rupees 100 per month per child, maximum for 2 children. So the exemption is maximum for 2 children, and the exemption which you will get is what? Maximum up to rupees 100 per month. So if you are getting 80 per month, then exemption will be 80. If you are getting 120 per month for 3 children, exemption will be 100 per month for 2 children, balance all will be taxable. Now let's say third one, hostel expense allowance. If you or your child is staying in the hostel while education, so hostel expense must be there, and for that also your employer is giving you certain amount of expenditure. So what is the exemption for that? It is 300 per month per child, maximum up to 2 children. The amount over here is what? 300. In children education, it was 100. Over here, it is 300. And last, special tribal or scheduled area allowance. You know, if you are going to do a job in a particular scheduled tribe area, your employer must be paying you certain amount of compensation for that. And that's why you are getting the exemption, which is again, average of this two, you can, assume that 200 per month, maximum up to 200 per month. You know, being a very small amount of exemption, 100, 300 and 200. But for blind and handicapped, transport allowance is somewhat very good, 3200 per month. Fine. Acha, in this, if you are following 115 BAC, only transport allowance exemption for blind, handicapped, disabled you will get, balance will be taxable. Now, whatever exemption we have not learned, if that is coming to your exam, remember it is fully taxable because there is no exemption provided in this act. Certain examples I have written for fully taxable allowances. City compensatory allowance, entertainment allowance. See, entertainment allowance, it is fully taxable. Regarding to that, there is some deduction under section 16 that we'll see later on. But remember, while calculating gross salary, entertainment allowance is fully taxable. Transport allowance, who is received for other than disabled person, normal person. Telephone allowance, medical allowance, tiffin allowance, project allowance, and last we saw already dearness allowance. All these allowances are what? Fully taxable allowances. So here we have learnt all the allowances which are applicable to you. Important allowances. There are so many other allowances also which I have not covered, but as you can understand, only this much were important for the quick revision. Now coming to working note number 2, which is retirement benefit. So whenever you are retiring from an organization due to age, due to the employer is removing you, because you are resigning from the job, whatever amount you are getting as a lump sum amount or after retirement, as a commutation, that will be called as what? Retirement benefit. Now, that retirement benefit obviously you are getting on the retirement, and that's why it must not be fully taxable. It must not be fully exempt also. Certain amount is exempt, certain amount is what? Taxable. Now, the very first retirement benefit that you are getting is what? Gratuity. To say, thank you, to show the gratitude what your employer is paying to you is gratuity. Whatever exemption of gratuity you will be receiving is given under section 10 clause 10. Section 10 clause 10 is all about the exemption of gratuity. Now remember one thing, if you receive gratuity during your employment, while you are working, your employer is paying you a gratuity, then it is not retirement benefit, it is a normal salary, it will always be taxable. But if you are receiving gratuity after the services are rendered, means you are receiving the gratuity after retirement, on or after retirement, we have to see who you are. You may be government employee, you may be other than government employee. If you are government employee, remember, gratuity will be fully exempt. What I said, if you receive gratuity being a government employee, it will be fully exempt, irrespective of the amount. But if you are other employee, any private sector employee, any private company, any public company, proprietorship firm, etc., etc. If you are employee of any other person, we have to see that whether that employer is a compulsory person who has to pay gratuity under an act called Payment of Gratuity Act 1972, or is paying voluntary. So if you are covered under Payment of Gratuity Act 1972, or you are not covered. Let's say you are covered under Payment of Gratuity Act 1972. Whichever is lower will be exempt. 3 conditions are given. You have to see whichever is lower, that much will be exempt, balance will be taxable. The first one, actual gratuity received. I said the exemption can never exceed the amount what you received. The second condition, a fixed amount, rupees 20 lakh. And the third one, 15 by 26. Why 26? For, Sundays, so working days are 26 generally. So 15 by 26 into last month salary. Whenever you retired, what last month salary you withdrew? That is last month salary. Multiply by completed year of service. For how much years you have worked in the organization? That is completed year of service. So 15 by 26 into last month salary into completed year of services. Now over here also the word came salary. So what question we should ask? What is the meaning of salary? Earlier what we studied? Basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage of turnover. Now remember, generally whenever Income Tax Act has drafted the definition, it is always basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage. But whenever this definition is picked up from any other act, it is basic plus DA all. For example, here the definition of salary is picked up from Payment of Gratuity Act 1972. And that's why the basic salary, the meaning of salary over here is basic salary plus DA all. Means entire DA you have to consider, but you should not consider commission. Now here, completed year of service. Let's say I have worked in the organization for 15 years and 7 months. Then how much years to be considered? The answer is 16. Meaning thereby, if the fraction in the month is more than 6, you have to consider it as a full year. For example, 24 years and 5 months, take it 24. 24 years and 6 months, take it 24. 24 years and 7 months, can I say more than 6 months? Take it 25 years. So that was the case if you are covered under Payment of Gratuity Act 1972. What if you are not covered under Payment of Gratuity Act 1972? Then whichever is lower will be exempt. Number 1, actual gratuity received. Number 2, fixed rupees 20 lakh. Can I say these two conditions are same only? No difference. Now the only difference is in condition number B. Now here what will be the condition? 15 by 30, exact 1/2. Multiply by average salary of last 10 months. Here you don't have to see the last month salary. You have to see average salary of last 10 months. Multiply by completed year of service. But when this condition will be applicable? When you are not covered under the act. Now here also the word came salary. What is the meaning of salary? Now this has not been picked up from POGA. This has been picked up by Income Tax Department itself. And that's why salary means basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage of turnover. And here you have to totally ignore the fraction. Means 24 years and 5 months, still 24 years. 24 years and 6 months, still 24 years. 24 years and 8 months, still 24 years. You have to ignore the fraction. In the question itself, they will give you whether he is covered or not. You don't have to think. So I just shared you that gratuity received during employment fully taxable. The exemption is only available if you are on retirement. And one more thing, from your all the employer during your entire life, total exemption of gratuity you can't claim more than 20 lakh. Obviously, if you are a government employee, there is no limit. For other than government employee, during your entire lifetime, from whatever employer you are receiving the gratuity, the total cannot exceed 20 lakh. So the limit of 20 lakh is lifetime. Now, what the second retirement benefit you may be receiving? That is pension. See, the pension is never received during the employment, so there is no worry about it. The pension is always received at the time of retirement or on or after retirement. Section 10 clause 10A is discussing about what? Pension. Now, pension can be of two types. Number 1, which you have generally seen in the world, that you are receiving per month a fixed amount, per month, per 6 months, whatever. That is called as monthly basis uncommuted pension, which you are not receiving on a lump sum basis, which you are receiving after retirement per month basis. Remember, the salary also you was receiving per month, pension also you are receiving per month, there is no difference. And that's why if you are receiving uncommuted pension, that is on a monthly basis pension, it is taxable for every kind of employee. It is taxable. Even though you are a government employee, even though you are not government employee, taxable. But if the pension you are receiving is a commuted pension, that is a lump sum pension, you have to think whether it is government employee or other than government employee. If the person for whom we are discussing is a government employee, the pension which you are receiving will become fully exempt. Nothing is taxable. But if you are thinking about other than government employee, what government wants to say, if you are receiving gratuity also and along with that you are receiving pension, you are receiving huge amount. So will give you less exemption, more taxability. But if you are not receiving gratuity, you are only receiving pension, you are receiving lesser amount, will give you higher exemption and less taxability. So if other than government employee is there, think whether he is receipt of gratuity or not in receipt of gratuity. If he is in receipt of gratuity, then exemption will be lower. 1/3 of the full pension will be exempt. If he is not in receipt of gratuity, then exemption will be more. 1/2 of full pension will be exempt. Let's say I have withdrew 5 lakh rupees of pension, which is 50% of my total pension. And let us assume that I am, let's say, receipt in gratuity. I am in receipt of gratuity. So now what I have to think, what is my total pension? What I have withdrawn? 5 lakh rupees. It is 50% of the total. So what will be my full pension? Can I say it will be 10 lakh? I am in receipt of gratuity. I am not a government employee. So for me, what will be the exemption? 1/3 of the full pension will be what? Exempt. What is the full pension over here? 10 lakh. So 1/3 of 10 lakh. That will be something 3,33,333 will be exempt and balance 1,66,667 will be taxable. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? If I would have not in receipt of gratuity, then 1/2 of this 10 lakh, that would be amounting to rupees 5 lakh. From the 5 lakh, total 5 lakh would have been exempt. 0 will be taxable. So the 1/3 or 1/2 you don't have to apply on the amount which you have received, that you have to apply on the amount which is total pension. One more thing, after you withdraw your commuted pension, your uncommuted pension will be reduced by that percentage automatically. For example, I am receiving 10,000 per month as an uncommuted pension from April month. Now suddenly in 1st December, I realized that I want certain amount, so I withdrew 40% of my total pension at once. That is a lump sum withdrawal. So now from December month onwards, whatever uncommuted pension I will be receiving, that won't be 10,000, it will automatically get reduced by 40%. So that means from April to November, I will receive 10,000 per month, but after withdrawing this 40%, whatever per month pension I will be receiving, that will be only 6,000 per month. This is a hidden adjustment that nobody will tell you in the exam. You have to identify. After withdrawing commuted pension, your uncommuted pension will be reduced by that percentage. That note I have given. Now the third retirement benefit which is applicable, and that is leave salary. Section 10 clause 10 AA. You know, in many organizations there is a policy that you take a leave, and whatever leave you will be taking will not deduct the amount, will pay the salary for that leaves also. And per year they decide how much paid leaves will be granted. Beyond that, if you are taking the leave, the money will be deducted from the salary, otherwise it won't. Many organization has the policy 1 year will be 30 days, 1 year will be 20 days, 1 year will be 40 days, like this. Now there are two options. Number one, if you want, we'll pay the amount of that paid leave during that month itself. Whenever we are paying the salary, we'll not deduct any amount, we'll pay you the entire salary. And the another option, while paying the salary of that month, we'll deduct the amount for the leave. And whenever you will retire, we'll accumulate all the money of paid leave, we'll give you at once. So there can be two things. Leave salary amount you are receiving either during employment along with the normal salary or at the time of retirement, accumulated. If you are receiving during employment, it is not retirement benefit, it is a normal salary, it is fully taxable. If you are receiving at the time of retirement, we have to see whether you are a government employee or other than government employee. If you are a government employee, this will be fully exempt. If you are other than government employee, lower of the following will be exempt. Number one, actual amount received. Number two, total salary of last 10 months. What is total salary of last 10 months? It is basically average salary of last 10 months multiplied by 10 months. That is what? Total salary of last 10 months. Then number three, fixed rupees 3 lakh. In gratuity, the limit was 20 lakh. In leave salary, the limit of rupees 3 lakh. And the fourth one, which is important, cash equivalent of leave. Now, what is that? I'll tell you after a while. But here, again the word came total salary of last 10 months. We have to see what is the meaning of salary. It is drafted by Income Tax Act only. So, salary means over here, basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage. Now, the question arises, sir, what is cash equivalent leave? Okay, let me explain you. For example, I worked in an organization for let's say 10 years and 7 months. So for this income tax purpose, we have to assume, ignore the fraction, 10 years. Per year, my employer was giving me the leave of, let's say, 20 days. So how much total paid leave I am having? 10 years multiplied by 20 days, that is total what? 200 days. Let's say from 200 days, for about 50 days, I have already taken the salary while I was working. So now at the time of retirement, how much leave salary I will be receiving? For how much days? Can I say 50 I have already withdrawn? So 150 is the pending amount. It is unavailed leaves. This 200 is called as gross leaves. 50 for which I have already taken the money is called as availed leaves. The balance is called as what? Unavailed leaves. Now this is in terms of days. So think how much month for which you have to take the salary. 150 days divided by 30 days, that means almost 5 months. Multiply this 5 months by average salary of 10 months, that is your cash equivalent leave. Simple. Means first you have to ignore the fraction, consider how much years you have worked. Take the gross salary, deduct the availed salary, so balance will be unavailed salary in terms of days. Calculate divide by 30 karke how much is in terms of month. That month you multiply by average salary of last 10 months. Simple. One small point over here. Whenever you are calculating this gross leave per year, your leave per year can never exceed 30 days. So let's say I am working in an organization in which my employer is giving me the leave of 40 days. So 10 years into 40 days, total 400 days are there. But so far as this exemption is concerned, I have to consider only 30 days. So 10 years into 30, that will be 300. Let's say I have availed 50 days, deduct 50, unavailed days 250, divide by 30. So how much month salary I will be receiving now? That will be 8.33 month. Multiply this by average salary of last 10 month. That is your third condition. So actual amount received or total salary of last 10 month or rupees 3 lakh or leave encashment. But in leave encashment, remember 1 year cannot exceed 30 days. The easy steps I have written over here. Are you understanding this? Then in between VRS is there, retrenchment compensation is there. I am not considering that because it is not that much important for the last day. What is more important is Provident Fund. Now, so far as Provident Fund is concerned, what is Provident Fund? Per year an employer will deduct certain amount from your salary. See, whatever basic salary you are given in the question, that is a gross amount. But actually while you will be paid that salary, that basic salary will be reduced by a certain amount. That is called as your contribution towards Provident Fund, employee contribution. The exact amount or even more amount can be contributed by employer also. So employee also contribute, employer also contribute in that. Now that amount will be accumulated in one account. Per year government will give you interest on that. And whenever you will retire, you will get a total maturity which will include your contribution, interest on your contribution, employer contribution per year, interest on employer contribution. So the total amount you will get at the time of maturity. So you can see over here that per year, there are total 3 things for which we have to discuss the taxability. First, what you are contributing, what is to be done for that? It is your investment, whether any deduction is available. Second, per year, your employer is crediting certain amount in your PF account. It is like your salary. So whether employer contribution to your PF, that will be taxable to you. And third, interest on Provident Fund, how much interest you will be getting. And last, at the time of retirement when you are getting a maturity, whether that maturity is taxable or not. Those are the 4 questions. Now there can be 4 kind of Provident Fund. One, statutory Provident Fund, which is for government employee, SPF. Second, recognized Provident Fund, RPF or EPF, that is for other employee. Then unrecognized Provident Fund, which is not registered with government. And last, superannuation fund, which is like Provident Fund, but in that, at the time of maturity, you will not get certain amount as a lump sum. You will get like annuity. Per year, you will get certain amount. That is superannuation fund. One more is there, public Provident Fund, but it is not only for employee, it is for each and every person. Each and every person can invest in PPF, that is Public Provident Fund. So I have not covered over here. That will be covering in deduction chapter. Now the very first Provident Fund, statutory Provident Fund. Can I say it is for government employee? But obviously you can understand lower taxability. If employer is contributing in their account, it will be totally exempt for them. If employee is contributing in provident fund, for that investment, they will get deduction under section 80C. Remember, this deduction you are getting after gross total income, not from salary income. Per year, whatever interest is credited to this provident fund, it is also completely exempt. And on maturity, whatever total provident fund they are getting, that entire amount will also be exempt. So you can understand, for statutory provident fund, the government employee is having full benefits. Whatever contribution is done, nothing is taxable. Whatever they contribute, they will get deduction in 80C. But whatever is the contribution which is made by other employee, they are made in recognized provident fund, employee provident fund, RPF or EPF. Now whatever their employer will contribute, it will be exempt for them only up to 12% of their salary. It is given under section 7. Up to 12% of salary, employer contribution will be exempt for them. So let's say my employer is contributing in my provident fund rupees 1 lakh and my salary is, let's say, 20 lakh. So what is 12% of 20 lakh? Can I say 20 lakh into 12% if you will do, then it will be amounting to 2.4 lakh. Employer is contributing 1 lakh, exemption amount is coming to 2.4 lakh, that means entire 1 lakh rupees is exempt, zero taxable. Let's say my salary would have been only 5 lakh rupees. Then in 5 lakh, what is 12% of 5 lakh? 60,000. Then only 60,000 will be exempt, balance 40,000 contribution by the employer will be taxable. Now here what is the meaning of the salary? Basic plus DA percentage plus commission percentage. The same meaning of HRA. Whatever you are contributing as an employee contribution, remember you will get deduction of 80C. Whatever interest you are getting, it will be exempt up to 9.5% per annum. 9.5% of salary? No. 9.5% per annum rate of interest. For example, I am getting interest on provident fund at the rate of 13% and the amount is coming to 13,000. So how much will be exempt? If it would have been received at the rate of 9.5%, what I would have received? 9,500. Exemption is 9,500. Balance, whatever 4,500 is there, that is taxable. 3,500 will be taxable. Now, at the time of maturity, generally it is exempt. Generally it is exempt. But in some of the cases, the amount will be taxable. Now let us understand when recognized provident fund maturity will be taxable. They like to say that if you are withdrawing the amount of this provident fund before 5 years, from opening of the account, before 5 years you are withdrawing that, the amount will be taxable. But if before 5 years you are joining some other company and you are transferring this provident fund into the provident fund account of that company, you are not withdrawing that, then it is not taxable. Or let's say you are withdrawing the amount before 5 years due to any unavoidable reason, disability, ill health, like that, then also it will be exempt. So meaning thereby, if you withdraw the amount of provident fund prior to 5th year of opening the account due to any avoidable reason, then it will be taxable. That is what I have written over here. If before 5 years you are transferring the provident fund account into national pension scheme account, then ultimately the amount is left with government only, and that's why again it will not be taxable, that will be exempt only. So do not withdraw the amount of RPF before 5 years, otherwise it will become what? Taxable, for which TDS is deducted under section 192A, that we will learn in TDS chapter. Unrecognized provident fund. It is a very bad provident fund that is not recognized with government. So whatever employer contribution is there, interest is there, it should be taxable, there should be no exemption. But still they have written not taxable, not taxable. Wait. Whatever employee is contributing it, but obviously no deduction will be granted. Now the question arises, sir, why not taxable employer contribution and interest? Because at the time of maturity, the entire amount of URPF will become taxable. See, you are taxing a person per year for a smaller amount. What is better than that? You tax on the entire amount at the time of maturity, a huge tax will be received at a higher slab. So in unrecognized provident fund, employer contribution and interest not taxable. Whatever employee will contribute, no deduction, but at the time of maturity, it will be fully taxable. However, at the time of maturity, you can understand there will be 4 portions that you are getting. In that, number 1 will be employer contribution, Number two, whatever interest is there on employer contribution. Remember, whatever you are receiving because of employer, that will always be taxable under the head salary. So, employer contribution and interest on employer contribution will be taxable under the head salary. Whatever you have contributed and you are getting it back, employee contribution, it was your investment and you are getting it back. So, that is never taxable. It is merely inflow. It is not your income. But whatever interest you are getting on your own contribution, that is like your interest on investment. And that's why it will be taxable under the head income from other sources, that is IFOS. In the similar manner, the last one, superannuation fund, section 10 clause 13, it is like a pension fund in which you contribute, your employer contribute, per year interest is credited at the time of retirement. Generally, you will get annual amount. Whatever employer is contributing up to 1,50,000 per annum exempt, balance taxable. Interest totally exempt. Whatever you contribute, you will get deduction under ATC. At the time of maturity, remember, if you get lump sum amount, generally taxable. If you get per year, it is not taxable because the main element of this fund is to receive the amount per year. So let it be per year, then it will not be taxable. So let's say superannuation fund, when it will be exempt. Number one, if it is paid to legal heir at the time of death, it is exempt, even though lump sum. Number two, payment made to employee as an annuity plan after retirement, exempt. But if employee has to, withdraw this amount on a lump sum basis, because he is incapacitated by disability, then also it will be exempt, it won't be taxable. One more point that you have to remember, which may be pipped into your examination, a very good amendment that has been made. See, there has been a huge exemption by saying that RPF employer contribution exempt up to 12% of salary, 1,50,000 in superannuation fund. There is some other deduction also that you will learn in 80 CCD subsection 2 for employer contribution in national pension scheme. Now, combinedly, if you see, if a person is getting a very huge salary, the very huge exemption will be granted. And that's why government don't want to give a huge exemption to the person who is earning a very good amount. And so the amendment said, whenever employer contribute in RPF, superannuation fund and national pension scheme, that we'll learn in deduction chapter, for all these three contribution you do, whatever is the exemption, or 7,50,000 per annum total, whichever is lower will be exempt. Let's say I am receiving 100 crore rupees of salary, example. My employer is contributing in my provident fund, let's say 11 crore. Then 100 crore into 12% will become 12 crore. Total 11 crore will be exempt for me. But now government said your exemption per year can never exceed 7,50,000 for employer contribution. Earlier I was claiming 11 crore rupees of exemption. Now my exemption will be only 7,50,000. Balance entire amount will be taxable to me. So, employer contribution to RPF, superannuation fund, NPS together, if exceeding 7,50,000 per annum, that excess amount is taxable. And whatever is the interest accruing on that excess amount, even that excess is also taxable. So, that was all about retirement benefits. Now, we will be learning working note number 3, that is what? Perquisite. Now, let us start learning the third working note, that is working note number 3, perquisites. Now, the very first perquisite, what is the perquisite first of all? Direct benefit given or reimbursement of the actual expenditure. Very important perquisites that we will be discussing in this working note. Number 1, value of rent-free unfurnished accommodation. Whenever your employer is giving you a house, hotel, motel, inn, guest house like a facility to stay within, if you are not a judge of Supreme Court or High Court, then it will be taxable to you. Now, what is the taxability of that? The taxability, the valuation is given under Rule 3, Sub Rule 1. If you are a government employee, then government will decide a license fee for your accommodation and that license fee will be taxable to you, nothing to be done much. If you are non-government employee, then we have to see whether accommodation is owned by employer or not owned by employer. It may be possible that employer himself is the owner and he is giving you the house. Or employer is not the owner, he is paying the rent somewhere and giving you the house free of cost. If the house is belonging to employer only, the ownership rests with the employer, then you see that the city in which this accommodation is there, what is the population of that city? As per 2001 census to be seen as on 2001. If the population of the city is less than or equal to 10 lakh, from your salary 7.5% will be taxable. We are not discussing exemption, we are discussing taxability. It will be taxable. If population is more than 10 lakh but less than or equal to 25 lakh, 10% of salary will be taxable. And if the population is more than 25 lakh, which 90% of our city will be having, then 15% of salary will be taxable. 7.5%, 10%, 15%. Now what is the meaning of salary over here? Basic plus DA, which is forming part, plus bonus, plus each and every kind of commission, fixed, percentage of turnover, percentage of net profit, plus all taxable allowances. Let's say my HRA 100, I am getting exemption of 90, balance 10 taxable. While calculating the perquisite of this accommodation, what salary I will be calculating, in that I will be taking this 10 rupees, which is taxable after exemption. But if the accommodation is not owned by employer, then lower of the following will be taxable. The first thing you have to see, what is the expenditure done by employer? Can I say the rent expense paid? So that is the benefit to you. It should be taxable, opportunity income. But if it was owned by employer, maximum taxability would have been 15% of salary. So here also the taxability cannot exceed 15% of salary. So if accommodation is not owned by employer, what is the taxable amount? Lower of the following. Number one, actual rent paid, or 15% of salary. Now, if the accommodation is furnished one, then what can I say is, furnished accommodation means unfurnished plus furniture. Now, how to find out the value of unfurnished accommodation? We just saw. Add the value of furniture in that. Now, you have to see whether the furniture is owned by employer or not owned by employer. If furniture is owned by employer, then what is the expenditure he is doing for which you are getting the benefit? Depreciation. So that depreciation should be taxable to you. So if furniture is owned by employer, per year what will be the taxable amount of that furniture? 10% per annum of original cost. Remember, here you have to calculate depre as per SLM basis. Even though employer calculate in any manner, for salary purpose we have to calculate fixed 10% per annum of original cost. Ignore WDV if given in the question. And here 10% is per annum. So if furniture is used for 4 months, calculate depreciation only for 4 months and it will be taxable. But if furniture is also not owned by employer, then see how much rent charges for that furniture your employer is paying to that owner. That much amount is your benefit. It will be taxable to you. Now for this entire salary chapter, whatever household appliances are there, like radio, TV, fridge, AC, washing machine, etc., etc., that is also called as a furniture and not electronic gadget. Now if that accommodation is not given for the entire year, if it is given only for few months, you have to calculate the salary for that few months and you have to apply the respected 7.5%, 10%, 15% of salary for that much salary only. Now here valuation of hotel is there, some exception is there, not important for the last day, so I have not covered. What if the accommodation is given at a concessional rent? For example, my employer is paying me the accommodation in Mumbai. He owned that accommodation. Let's say my salary is rupees 10 lakh. So what will be taxable perquisite to me? 15% of salary, population more than 25 lakh. What is 15% of 10 lakh? It is 1,50,000. Now let's say my employer is collecting rupees 50,000 from me for this accommodation. Then can I say out of the benefit of 1,50,000, 50,000 is already collected by my employer. So what is the net benefit to me? Only 1 lakh. So 1 lakh will be taxable. So if instead of rent-free accommodation, my employer is charging some of the account from me, so that is a concessional rent, then that much recovery is to be deducted from the total valuation. And if the amount balance is a positive amount, then that will be taxable. Simple. Then, valuation of perquisite in respect of free domestic servant. Free domestic servant means sweeper, gardener, watchman, personal attendant, any kind of assistant is employed by you and your employer is giving the salary for that. If this kind of perquisite is there, you see what are the salary that my employer has paid, that much is the free benefit for me, and if anything is recovered from me by my employer, then find out what is the net benefit. If it is positive, then it will be taxable. I employed a servant in my house, the salary reimbursed by my employer per year is 1,20,000. Against that he charged from me 20,000. So balance 1 lakh will be what? My perquisite. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? So that is given in rule 3, sub rule 3. Sir, sub rules are to be remembered. It is okay if you don't remember rule 3, that is enough. It is better if you remember all, by the way. Then, valuation of perquisite in respect of free institute. Rule 3, sub rule 5. Means you or your family member is given admission to a school, college with some discount, or the school college belongs to employer himself, so he don't charge any amount. This is called as valuation of perquisite for free institute, free educational facility. Now you see first of all that who is being served with that education, who is provided that facility? Employee himself or any household member of employee, any family member or any relative like that. If this facility is given to the employee himself, then generally it is for the benefit of their organization and it will never be taxable. Seminar fee reimbursed, some courses are done by the employee, fees are reimbursed by the employer, nothing is taxable. But if the facility is provided to the family members, then you have to see whether the school is owned by employer or not owned by employer. Let's say it is not owned by employer. Then can I say whatever fees my employer will be paying to that school or college, that should be taxable to me. So actual fees paid by the employer, that should be taxable to me. But if the school is owned by employer is not going to charge anything to himself. So that can't I take the basis what is the actual fees paid. Then you see whether any other students are also allowed. Then what are the charges that this school is charging from those students that has not been charged from me. So whatever fees charged from other student, that should be taxable to me, opportunity cost. But let's say it is a military kind of school wherein the other students are never allowed, only employees' relatives are allowed. Then you see if you have taken the admission in any other nearby institute, what fees they would have charged from you, it will be taxable to you. So fees charged by other institute in similar locality providing similar facility will be taxable. See, where other students are allowed, it is open school. If it is not allowed, it is closed school. Your valuation depends on that. Purely logical basis. There is nothing called mug up. And from all of this, whatever recovery is being done by employer, that is to be deducted. Balance if positive, taxable. Let's say the fees charged from other student who is not employee relative is 1 lakh rupees per year, and from employee relative they charged only 10,000. So how much discount they have given to the employee? 90,000. So how much perquisite should be taxable? 90,000. Simple. But there is a small provision over here. If the school is owned by employer, then whether it is open or closed, and if employees' children are going to that school, then find out what is the taxable value. If the value is up to rupees 1,000 per month per child, there is no limit on the children, then entire amount of that taxability will be zero, nothing will be taxable. So exemption is given for the school or college which is owned by employer, employees' children going in that school, and the value is up to 1,000 per month per child, then it won't be taxable. If school is not owned by employer, entire amount will be taxable. School owned by employer, but brother, sister or spouse is going to the school or college, again taxable. Exemption is only if the school is owned by employer and children is going to the school. One more point. What if the value is more than 1,000 per month? Then let's say the value is coming to 1,200 per month. Then whether 1,200 is fully taxable or only the balance 200 taxable? The answer is both correct. You can assume both alternative. Number one, you can assume fully taxable, you are right. Number two, you can assume up to 1,000 exempt, only 200 taxable, you are again right. Write your assumption accordingly and write your answer. See, according to me, better is to make it fully taxable, because generally ICAI do this only. If in the question it is given that let's say ABC company is having a tie-up with DPS school, that whosoever will go to this school, they will get 50% discount. That is a pure tie-up. In this case, how to do the valuation? By assuming that this school or college is owned by employer. If the tie-up is there with some institute, it will be assumed that employer is the deemed owner of that institute and do the valuation accordingly. The next perquisite, leave travel concession, section 10 clause 5. Now this is the point wherein we are going to see the exemption, not the taxability. Leave travel concession, what we can popularly known as LTC. What is leave travel concession? See, in many organizations there is a policy that in a block of let's say 4 years, or let's say in 1 year you go with your family to the vacation once, twice, and whatever your to and fro expense, traveling expense is there, employer will reimburse that expenditure. That is leave travel concession. Whatever expenditure your employer is doing, basically it is your perquisite. But section 10 clause 5 says, we will give you exemption from this taxability, but the exemption is even maximum for 2 times in a block of 4 calendar year. This block system started from the year 1986 as per rule 2B. So the current block which is going on in 2018 till 2021 means this is calendar year. From 1st January 18 till 31st December 21, whenever you will go, whatever journey you will make, and your employer is reimbursing the amount of traveling expense for the vacation, maximum 2 times you can take the exemption. If the third journey you are doing and your employer is giving reimbursement of that third journey also, that third journey will be fully taxable. Exemption will be available for maximum 2 times, and the block is going on 2018 till 2021. But this exemption is available only if you travel anywhere in India. If you go outside India and your employer is reimbursing that amount, it will be fully taxable. And the exemption is only for the traveling expenditure for employee himself and his family member. And who is family over there? Spouse, children. Now spouse and children can be dependent or can be independent. Then parents, brother, sister, but parents, brother, sister should be completely dependent. So if let's say you are doing the very first journey of your block, who is the passenger? Let's say me, myself, my wife, my children who are independent. Then let's say my brother is there, my sister is there, my parents is there, my friends are there. Brother is dependent, sister is independent, parents are independent, friends are dependent. Then my employer is reimbursing the salary of all of them, let's say. Then I will get exemption for myself, my wife, my children, my brother because he is disabled, not for the sister, not for the parents because they are independent, not for the friends because they are not the family. For this, whatever expenditure is reimbursed, that will be taxable, and for this 4, it will be exempt. But if this journey is the third journey, then for all of them, whatever expense is done, that all will be taxable. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? Now here, whether any limit is there on the children. Now whatever I am going to teach for this limit, it will be only applicable for this concept of LTC. I don't know, very weird limit is drafted. You have to see when the birth of these children have been done. If the birth is taken place before 1st October 98, any number of children is allowed, 2, 3, 4, whatever. But if the birth is on or after 1st October 98, then only 2 children will be allowed, maximum 2. And if you have 3 children, the journey is being done, traveling expenditure reimbursed for 3 children. For that third children, it will be taxable, even though it is first journey. But let's say after 1st October 98, you had your first child, it is a single child. Now you had the second child, but with the grace of God, it came multiple child, twins, triplicate. Then it will be counted as 1 only. And that's why the total will be counted as maximum 2. Because it was not your mistake. But let's say the first child came to twins. And then you have a second child who is a single child, then it is totally your mistake because the first child itself was twins and you came to know it is a twins. Still you gave a birth to the third child. So now we won't give that exemption. Now all this total will be counted as 3. And for 2 will give you the exemption. For third it will be taxable. Simple. Now what is the maximum exemption that you will be getting? You can do the journey, through the cruise also. But will not give you the exemption for the traveling expenditure of cruise. You have to see from which mode you have done the journey. If you have done the journey through air, through plane, in business class, the maximum exemption that we can give is the fare if it would have incurred if you have traveled through economy class. So maximum expense that will be exempted is if you have traveled through economy class. If you have done the journey through rail, then maximum exemption can be given if you would have traveled through first class AC compartment. If you have done the journey through any other mode of transport, by bus or by self-driving or any other mode, what we will be looking at, whether the place from which you started your journey and the place to which you have ended your journey It is connected by rail. If yes, then see what are the charges of AC first class fare. Up to that amount the expense will be exempted. If that both places are not connected with the rail, then you see whether any recognized public transport applicable. If yes, then lower will be exempt, deluxe class fare of that or actual expenditure. But if recognized public transport is also not there, then you become a railway minister and you assume that if I would have started rail over here, how much fare would have been charged, based on kilometer and all. Then AC first class fare, if you would have charged, that will be exempt, balance taxable. Now remember, if in the block of this 4 year, you have done only one journey or you have done 0 journey, exemption was given for 2, but you could not claim 2. You have claimed either 0 or you would have claimed only 1 exemption. Maximum 1 exemption which you have not claimed, you can carry forward to the next block which you have to use in the very first year of that next block. So let's say in the 2018 to 2020 when I did 0 journey, I got 2 exemption but I didn't claim any one. 1 exemption I can carry forward to the next block 2022 till 2025. But that carry forward it will have to be claimed in 2022 itself. If I don't, then it will vanish. And here the exemption is only for traveling expenditure, not for any other food expenditure or so. Then the next perquisite. Valuation of perquisite for interest-free loan or loan given at concessional rate. I am going to take a loan in the market, let's say 10 lakh rupees, and the bank, State Bank of India, on the 1st April, let's say the rate of interest is coming to 6%. My employer is giving me the same loan for 2%. So can I say rupees 10 lakh loan I would have taken. SBI has charged on 1st April 6%. My employer is charging only 2%. I am benefited with 4%. 10 lakh into 4%, that will be whatever 40,000 rupees is there, that is my benefit. So what is the perquisite value over there? Whatever is the market rate interest minus whatever interest is charged by the employer, balance if positive will be taxable. Now what is the market rate that you have to consider? That what is the rate charged by State Bank of India on the first day of the previous year. However, if the original loan amount does not exceed rupees 20,000, the loan that you have taken is not exceeding 20,000, then even though employer hasn't charged any interest, still it won't be taxable because the loan amount is very low. Or if the loan is taken for, let's say, crore rupees, but if it is for the treatment for a disease which is mentioned under Rule 3A, specified disease for which you don't have to remember the name, still it will be exempt. The interest benefit will not be taxable. Next perquisite, your employer has given you some movable asset for doing use of movable asset. Then you see which kind of asset you are given with. It is computer, laptop, telephone, mobile phone, or even the bill is reimbursed. It will never be taxable because the ultimate benefit is with employer. So if computer, laptop, telephone, mobile given for usage or even the bill is reimbursed, nothing is taxable. Any other movable asset is there except motor car, then you see the same rule, owned by employer, not owned by employer. Owned by employer, 10% per annum of original cost taxable. Not owned by employer, rent paid by employer will be taxable. Deduct recovery, balance positive will be taxable. Then sale of movable asset. Let's say employer is having one asset which he has purchased 2 years back for rupees 50 lakh. After 2 years depreciation, can I say the value can be up to, let's say, 30 lakh. This asset is sold to you for rupees 20 lakh. Today the value was 30 lakh. You are given only 20 lakh. The balance 10 lakh is your benefit, that is sale of movable asset, that is taxable. The question arises, sir, how you depreciate this? How you came up to 30 lakh? That is the only thing that we have to see. Means in sale of movable asset, what is the perquisite value? Original cost to employer minus depreciation minus recovery, balance if positive taxable. But how to depreciate this asset? If it is electronic items or computer or laptop, you have to depreciate it 50% per completed year on WDV basis. Ignore the fraction. If it is motor car, depreciate it by 20% per year on WDV basis. If any other asset like motor bike, furniture, household appliances, 10% SLM basis. In months, you don't have to consider the month. For example, I purchased one computer 2 years back for rupees 10 lakh. I used it for 2 years and 3 months and then I sold to my employee for rupees 2 lakh. What is the taxability for my employee? Then 10 lakh minus 50% for 1 year minus 50% for a second year. Ignore this 3 month. Today the value will be 2,50,000. I sold it for rupees 2 lakh only. What is the benefit to my employee? 50,000. 50,000 perquisite will be taxable. Then the next perquisite. Valuation of medical facilities. Proviso to section 17 subsection 2. Now, whenever your employer is giving any medical facility to you in the hospital or in a clinic or so, sometimes whatever expenditure is done, that is taxable, sometimes it is exempted. First of all, whenever I will say it is exempted, the exemption is only if the patient is you yourself or your family member. And the family over here is also what? Spouse, children, they both can be dependent or independent. Parents, brother, sister, but those three should be completely what? Dependent. So here if the patient is, grandparents, in-laws, parents, brother, sister who is not dependent, then exemption will never be applicable. But even if you or your family member is there, when exemption is available? You see, when the treatment is done, if the treatment is done in any hospital that is owned by employer, or any hospital which is a government hospital, or any hospital which is approved by income tax authority for treatment of disease under rule 3A, then whatever expenditure is done by the employer for your or your family member, that is not taxable for you. If here, let's say in government hospital, the treatment is done for grandparents, it will be taxable because they are not family, exemption not applicable. But if treatment is done in any other hospital, private hospital, family doctor, nursing home, it is fully taxable, even though treatment is done for me or my family member. Now, if the treatment is done outside India for me or my family member, total 3 kind of expense can be done for this treatment. Number 1, treatment expense. Number 2, over there staying expense. Number 3, traveling expense. You see, what is the treatment expense and staying expense that is approved by RBI? Let's say my employer is reimbursing treatment and staying expense 3 lakh. RBI has approved 2 lakh. Only 2 lakh will be exempted. 1 lakh will be taxable. Now this exemption is only if the expenditure is done for you plus 1 attendant. For balance all, if reimbursement is done, it is taxable. Now if traveling expenditure is also reimbursed by the employer, you see what is your gross total income after including all the above taxability, excluding traveling expense, gross total income. If it is more than 2 lakh, then this traveling expense reimbursement it will be fully taxable. If it is less than or equal to 2 lakh, then it will be fully exempt. Now there can be 2 type of premium that your employer is paying for you. One Mediclaim, another one life insurance premium. Mediclaim paid by your employer, it is exempt. Life insurance premium paid, it will be taxable. So Mediclaim paid for you or your family, it is not a perquisite. Life insurance premium paid, it will be fully taxable. Now let us move to the very next perquisite, that is valuation of perquisite in respect of motor car. Rule 3 sub rule 2. If the motor car is given for the use. Now see, there can be total maximum 2 kind of possibility. Car is owned by employee himself or the car is owned by employer. Now in that also 2 subcategory can be there. The day-to-day expenditure is done by employee or day-to-day expenditure is done by employer. So in and all there are total 4 category. Number 1, car owned by employee, expense done by employee. Number 2, car owned by employee but all the petrol, diesel expense, maintenance expense, driver salary paid by employer. Number 3, car owned by employer but the expenditure is done by employee. Number 4, car is owned by employer, expense is done by employer. Now in these 4 cases also, again there can be 3 category. Car is only used for official purpose. Number 2, car is only used for private purpose. Number 3, partly official, partly private purpose. Understand, whatever expenditure for official purpose, that is never taxable. Whatever expenditure is done only by employee, that is also not taxable because it is the expenditure, not the benefit. So the first case, car is owned by employee, expense is done by employee. Can I say even though it is used for any purpose, employer is doing nothing and that's why nothing is taxable in all the cases. If car is owned by car is owned by employee but the expense is done by employer, and if it is only for official purpose, no benefit to the employee, so nothing is taxable. But if it is only for private purpose, then you think what are the expenditure that employer is doing for which employee is getting full benefit. Can I say repair maintenance expense, running maintenance cost, driver salary, whatever is the total cost, deduct recovery, balance if positive, taxable. But if it is used partly for official purpose, partly for private purpose, then you see what is the total cost to employer. From that, what is the cost assigned to official purpose, deduct that, it should not be taxable. Deduct any recovery, balance should be taxable. So the only question arises, sir, how to determine what is the official purpose expenditure? A fixed amount they have given, which you have to deduct. If your car engine capacity is less than or equal to 1600 cc, then 1800 per month is the fixed official purpose. If it is more than 1600 cc, so 2400 per month. And if driver is given, then in all the two cases you have to add 900 per month. And this amount you will deduct from the total cost, balance if positive will be taxable. But the second case can be, car is owned by employer, expense is met by employee. Now here, expenses are done by employee. So only the depreciation expense, or if the car is taken on rent, then that rental expense, that is basically done by whom? Employer. Now if this car is only used for official purpose, nothing is taxable. If this car is used by a private purpose, so can I say what is the cost to employer? Either 10% depre or higher charges, that is taxable. Deduct recovery, balance if positive, taxable. But if it is partly, then they have given a fixed amount, you close your eyes and you make it taxable without looking at what is the actual cost. What is the total fixed amount they have given for the taxability? Same, if less than or equal to 1600 cubic capacity, then 600 per month will be taxable. More than 1600, then 900 per month will be taxable. Now, if the car is owned by employer, expense is done by employer, only for official purpose, nothing is taxable. Only for private purpose, whatever is the total cost, number 1, 10% depre or higher charges, number 2, running maintenance, number 3, driver salary, all will be taxable to employee after deducting the recovery. But if it is partly, then a fixed amount is given. You don't see what is the actual cost, directly tax this actual, the amount which they have given. What is the amount? Either 1800 per month or 2400 per month. And if driver salary is also there, add 900 per month. Don't deduct recovery. The next perquisite, if you are given with lunch, refreshment, etc. Rule 3, sub-rule 7, clause 3. Now see, if you are given the allowances, lunch allowance, dinner allowance, refreshment allowance, it is never exempt, it is fully taxable. But if you are given perquisite, like you are given food, non-alcoholic beverages in working area for a remote area, then but obviously it was the duty of employer to give you the food over there because you would have found nothing in that remote area, and that's why it is never taxable. If in any area during working hours you are given with tea and snacks, that is also never taxable. However, if you are given lunch, refreshment or non-alcoholic beverages at any other place which is, not a remote area, then whatever is the cost per meal, deduct rupees 50 per meal, balance taxable. Let's say to prepare a meal in Ahmedabad, one particular company is taking for its employee 80 rupees of cost and charging 10 rupees from employee. Then 80 rupees minus 50 rupees of exemption minus 10 rupees of recovery, balance 20 rupees will be taxable per meal. And let's say employee is having 300 meal per year, then total 6000 will be taxable. What if the gift voucher or token is given to the employee? If the gift is in cash or directly given in bank account, then it is taxable. But if it is in kind, then see what is the total value of that gift per year. If the total value is up to rupees 5000, nothing is taxable. So gift voucher, gift in kind up to 5000, nothing is taxable. If it is more than 5000, then either it is fully taxable or up to 5000 exempt, balance is taxable. Both the views are correct. You can take any view, better to follow fully taxable because they are doing it majority time fully taxable. Then sweat equity share, which you called is ESOP. Let's say a company has given me the ESOP being an employee. The market value is 10,000. Company has given me only for rupees 2,000. What is the benefit for me? 8,000. What is the taxable amount for me? 8,000. Means how to determine the value of sweat equity share? Fair market value on the date of exercising the option minus cost recovered from employee, balance if positive, taxable. Going one more step forward, let's say in the future I am selling this ESOPs for rupees 12,000, what will be capital gain? Understand one station rule. The journey which you have stopped at, the further journey will start at the same station, from the same station. In the income tax also, my taxation journey has stopped at rupees 10,000 by taxing this 8,000 in perquisite. Then in the future, for calculating the capital gain, from the sale value of 12,000, the cost I will deduct rupees 10,000 and only 2,000 rupees will be my capital gain. Means the fair market value which I have considered to calculate the perquisite in salary chapter, that will become my cost of acquisition for future in capital gain chapter. Understand in a different manner. I have purchased the ESOP in 2000, I am selling for rupees 12,000, total 10,000 rupees is my gain. And that is why I am doing taxable, na? 8,000 in salary, 2,000 in capital gain. So that's how I bifurcated my income into different heads by taking fair market value. That is given in section 49 clause 2AA. One more amendment which can be asked in MCQ in your attempt. If you are an employee of a startup company, the certificate which is given by government, startup company, then if that startup company gives you the ESOP, that ESOP will not be taxable to you in the same year. It will be taxable after 5 years from end of previous year, or the year in which you sell that ESOP, or the year in which you are terminating from that job, whichever is earlier. So let's say I have been given ESOP in 2021, then it will be taxable to me in 21, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 25, 26 it will be taxable. That is after 5 years. But let's say in 23, 24 itself I am selling this ESOP, then it will be taxable in the year 23, 24. This benefit is only if you are an employee of a startup unit. Then, for any valuation of perquisite for which benefits or valuation is not given above, what will be the value? What is the cost to employer? Deduct the amount attributable for official purpose, deduct recovery, balance if positive, taxable, simple. Then from your gross salary, up to now gross salary is done. Now from this gross salary what we will get is deduction under section 16. There are 3 deductions. Number 1 is the standard deduction that you will definitely forget in your examination. Why I am saying this, that definitely you will forget this, because it is a hidden adjustment. Section 16 clause 1A. What is the deduction? 50,000 from any employer together, maximum 50,000 per year. So gross salary or 50,000, whichever is lower, standard deduction, 16 clause 1A. Number 2, entertainment allowance, section 16 clause 2. Remember, whenever you are getting entertainment allowance, first you have to do fully taxable, add into your income. But then if you are a government employee, then take a deduction. Whichever is lower will be deductible. Number 1, 20% of the basic salary. Number 2, whatever amount of you have received for entertainment allowance. Number 3, rupees 5,000 per annum, means maximum deduction is 5,000. This deduction is only available if you are a government employee, not to any other employee. And last, section 16 clause 3, professional tax. This is the tax which a state government collects from you if you are doing any business or you are an employee. Now, let's say this professional tax is paid by employee himself. So from the gross salary, whatever he has actually paid during the year, he will take deduction under section 16 clause 3. But let's say this professional tax of employee is paid by employer. Then can I say it is a perquisite for employee? So first you have to add this perquisite into your income and then you take the deduction if it is actually paid by employer. For example, the total professional tax is 5,000, 2,000 paid by employee, 3,000 paid by employer. So what I will do? I will add into my income rupees 3,000 because it is paid by employer. But I will take deduction of entire 5,000 because it is paid by me plus my employer both. If it is not paid during the year, it is paid in the next year, then deduction is available in the next year. Same like municipal tax in house property. But remember, if you are following the optional tax system of 115 BAC, the entire section 16 not applicable and your gross salary becomes your income from salary. After doing all this, you had to refer 3 questions in salary chapter. JKSC classwork question number 1. Then module exercise illustration number 19 and exercise question number 5. On the last day from salary chapter, these three questions are most important. JKC question number 1, you have the solution in your notebook, and this 2 module question, which is given in JKC also along with the answer. So this is income from salary for us. Thank you so much.